CBSE Board, Class 11, History, Chapter 4, Part 11, Audio by Renee Matthew. Now we need to look at the economic changes which took place as a result of many things which happened. The technical progress was at its peak, and of course people had developed trade routes. We saw that the British people were very clever in collecting the taxes from their own people, from the natives, and buying things was something which was very different for them, and the poor had very little money to even buy their consumer goods. So this is something that we saw in the previous audio, and the two main important points, the two classes to which the European settling or all these things paved way for is an important point. The exhibition at the Crystal Palace, and then now we need to look at the displacing indigenous people. More points are coming up in that. We saw the three groups already that we are going to discuss in this session, and how the people were actually pushed out, especially by the European settlers, which were known as colonies. They started calling these places as colonies, and when you consider Europe to be a very big mother country, they considered the colonies to be their states because they had authority over it. In the 19th and 20th century, people from Asian countries also started migrating to some of these countries. They started moving, and that is how we have got a lot of people in other places. So from the Asian, there was a kind of intermixing of culture which took place. Today, the Europeans and Asians form the majority in these countries because it's not just the basic Europeans that you find there. People from Asia are also part of it, and number of the native inhabitants started reducing. So as we had more migrants in Europe, the number of native inhabitants also reduced. It started deteriorating, and there was an intermixture of culture and people and tradition which took place. Okay. Now, these people can be hardly seen in towns, the natives, and people almost forgot about the names that they gave to their own rivers and places. Some of the names given to rivers, towns, they're derived from the native names, like for example, Ohio, Mississippi, Seattle in the USA, Saskatchewan in Canada, Wollongong, Parramatta in Australia. All these places, all these names were forgotten because natives started reducing in this country. So it was a kind of mixture which took place, which gave which led to the formation of new groups, like how we had the Creole. Do you remember the Creole? Yeah, something like that, the mixture which took place. And till the middle of the 20th century, everybody had to study about the Europeans' discovery and how they conducted voyages and all that. And it had to be studied by the people in the America and the Australian history textbooks, because that was the kind of authority that they enjoyed. And we can see that they even hardly mentioned about the natives being hostile to Europeans. It is as if they readily accepted the Europeans that they mentioned in the history books. Now it can be studied by the anthropologists in America from the 1840s. Okay, these people who actually studied about the human beings, they were able to understand the suppression and the regression that the natives always faced when the coloners came to settle in their place. So much later, that is from the 1960s, the natives were actually encouraged to write their own history. So literature and even history saw a great eruption of the recorded history by the natives, not from the Europeans. It was not Euro-centered. Euro-centered means people did not speak from the European point of view, but natives started recording their own experiences, and this came to be called as oral history. It started as oral history in the beginning. So, because of all these venture, we are able to read about the works and fiction which is written by the native people, and also they started preserving many things in the museums. They started giving importance to their own art. Native art is even now seen in the galleries, and also the way people preserve their aboriginal way of life. So it is only because of this oral history, it is because of the encouragement of this oral history that we are able to see the preserved native art. Now, when we talk about the National Museum of the American Indian in the USA, it has been developed. It was actually evolved by the American Indians themselves. It was curated by the American Indians themselves when you look at the National Museum. Now, it is regarding European imperialism. We know that the Spanish and the Portuguese were not able to expand their empire in the Americas because Americas were very shrewd, they understood their intention. But they started concentrating, they started focusing in other countries like France, Holland and England. They began expanding their trading activities there, and they also established colonies in America, Africa and Asia, but not in these Americas. Later, it is not at that time, Spanish and Portuguese were not able to succeed, but France, Holland, England became the most important powers by this time. They started giving way to imperialism. And we already know that Ireland was a colony of England, and most of the landowners in Ireland were English settlers. Now, from the 18th century, what happened? It was really obvious that the prospect of profit, it was only because of their interest in profit that people, the natives, were driven from their own colonies. There was a lot of significant variations which could be felt in the society, in the economy. They started expanding, and that was because of their interest in the profit which drove the natives from their own land. So that is something which is very important. And in South Asia, what happened? This particular picture, you must be very clear about it. The East India Company had trade relationships, and it got developed into political powers. They started defeating the rulers. This is something which happened in India also. Indian subcontinent was divided into many small kingdoms, and we know that there was no unity between the kingdoms. So because of that, the foreigners found it very easy to come, annex and develop the trade relationships and also to conquer it. So they did not have all these plans in the beginning, but slowly they understood that the base was not there. That is something that we learned in Mongol Empire, right? They had so much of unity. The administration was very strict. So they were able to retain the older, well-developed administrative system. What do you mean by that? This means that by the time the Britishers reached the East India Company or they reached South Asia, they had a lot of experience with the other colonies. So they already know how to conquer, how to come and have a trade relationship, and then later slowly expand their empire. So the already established administrative system was a kind of standard way in which they asserted their power. They started collecting taxes from the landowners, and later they built railways for their convenience. But still, it has become a great development for us also. Railways were built with them, and also they started excavating the mines. Some of the mines in India was also untouched, but because they had progression in their technology, they were able to excavate mines, but at the expense of our natives. And they also established very big plantations where our natives, where Indians were made to work, just like how they developed in Africa. Now, in Africa, except South Africa, Europeans traded on the coast. They were not very confident to enter the interior parts. They only traded with the coast except South Africa. And later you can see that the European countries reached an agreement where they wanted to divide Africa as colonies for themselves. They started cutting the place into colonies for themselves. And we can also see about the word settler. Okay, what do you mean by settler? It is used for the Dutch in South Africa, the British in Ireland, New Zealand and Australia, and the Europeans in America. So all these places, people who came here, these people were known as the settlers. Don't get mixed up, alright? Now, the official language in these colonies was English, except in Canada, where the official language was actually French. All the other places were required to speak English and to make English as the official language. Now, we need to look at North America. the continent of North America, we need to look at the geography. You know that it extends from the Arctic Circle to the Tropic of Cancer, from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. Now we need to look at the topography of this place. West of the chain of the Rocky Mountains is the desert of Arizona, and still further when you go, you have Sierra Nevada mountains to the east. The Great Plains is there, the Great Lakes you have, the valleys of the Mississippi and the Ohio and the Appalachian Mountains. So this is the topography. They have given the topography so that you will understand better the conditions. Now to the south we have got Mexico, that also we know. And 40% of Canada is covered with, it was covered with forests, and these three things, that is oil, gas, mineral resources, can be found in many areas, and that explains many big industries in the USA and Canada. It is because of the availability of the resources, and they also had the technology to tap these resources, which was a great boon for them. So oil, gas and mineral resources. Today what happens? Wheat, corn and fruit are grown extensively, and fishing is a major industry in Canada. They are able to grow all these things, and also fishing has become a major industry in Canada. Now, mining, industry and extensive agriculture was developed only in the last 200 years by immigrants from Europe, Africa and China. It's not that the natives did not have any access or they did not know about mining, industry and extensive culture, but it was only developed after the entry of the Europeans, Africans and the Chinese. But these people who were living in the North America for thousands of years, of course before the entry of the Europeans itself, learned of its existence. They knew about all these things, but maybe because their resources, maybe because the technology that they had was not enough for it. Now we need to look at the native people. The early inhabitants of North America, of course, came from Asia, and that too 3000 years back it came, and that too on a London bridge across Bering Straits it was developed, and they actually landed there initially during the Ice Age 10,000 years ago. Then they started moving further south. So after reaching there 10,000 years ago, they started moving further south. It happened 30,000 years back. Now we need to see like how they did, like how they used these arrows, the pointed arrows, and how they cooked, and everything is given in these pictures. Now the oldest artifact, the oldest source that we have is an arrow point which the archaeologists had excavated, and they say that it is almost 11,000 years old. And the population, we can see that the population started increasing only 5,000 years ago when the climate became very stable. When the climatic conditions kind of improved, only population increased. Of course, topography, climate, then also changes which took place in the cosmos, all these things contributed to the changes which took place in the economy, society and also in the politics of a particular place. Now these people who lived in North America, they were known as bands, and they lived in villages along river valleys because it was very easy for them to get water and also to have little bit of cultivation around their places. And mostly they ate fish and meat, and they also cultivated vegetables and maize. Fish and meat was eaten, and they also cultivated vegetables and maize. They often went for long journeys in search of meat. They used to go for kind of hunting expeditions, and what was available in these places, we had only the bison, the wild buffalo which roamed the grasslands. They used to hunt it and they used to capture it. Okay. Now, they learned the art of riding horses from the Spanish settlers. So it was very easy for them to use that from the 17th century, where the natives started riding horses and they bought these horses from the Spanish settlers, and this happened from the 17th century. And they killed as many as animals which they needed to make food. It was kind of killed, and they got this convenience when they started entering the comfort zone. It was very easy for them to kill many animals as much as they needed for food. So that was also taught by the Spanish settlers. we can see that they did not attempt much in extensive agriculture. Whatever they got, they were very happy and complacent with the kind of whatever they had. So they did not attempt in extensive agriculture, and they did not produce anything in surplus so that they could trade, because they were very happy with that what they had, and they were not interested in producing extra things. So what happened as a result? Development of further kingdoms did not take place.